Dear friends, good afternoon and warm welcome to all of you. The Roundtable, the Commonwealth Journal of International Affairs, is Britain's oldest international affairs journal and provides analysis and commentary on all aspects of international affairs affecting the Commonwealth. We are here today for the launch of the Roundtable special issue on Brexit and the Commonwealth, What Next, and the inauguration of the India chapter of the Roundtable. Mr. Venkataya, the editor of the Roundtable, could not be here because he was traveling and he sends his best wishes. This event is being organized as a collaborative endeavor between Roundtable and the ICRIER. As you all know, ICRIER is one of the leading think tanks to provide economic basis for policy making. Friends, we have Dr. Rajat Kathuria, the director and CEO of the Indian Council for Research in International Economic Relations, ICRIER, who will be chairing this session. He has over 20 years of experience in teaching and 15 years of experience in economic policy. And he has been on many committees and advisory boards. We also have Mr. Kamalesh Sharma, who is the former Commonwealth Secretary General. He joined the Foreign Service in 1965 and served as ambassador in 5 missions, including India's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, where he was closely involved with the Commonwealth affairs. We are very happy to have here Professor James Mayall, who is an Emeritus Fellow in International Relations, Sidney, Sussex College, University of Cambridge. He started his career as a National Service Officer and in the British Civil Service, worked in West Africa and in British High Commission in New Delhi before moving into the academic world. He writes extensively on African states and also on North-South relations and international politics. His book, Nationalism and International Society, won Political Studies Association Prize in 1990. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, he will be joining us soon. He's on his way, and we are very happy to have him amongst us. As you all know, he's an author, politician, and a former international civil servant. Shashi Tharoor straddles several worlds of experience. Currently a second-term Member of Parliament, representing the Thiruvananthapuram constituency and chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs. He has been previously served as Minister of State for Human Resource Development and Minister of State for External Affairs in the Government of India. Of course, we are very happy to have Mr. Sunanda Datta-Ray. He's one of India's leading journalists. He spent many years in Singapore as consultant with the Straits Times, teaching at Nanyang Technological University and researching at Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. His more than 50 years in journalism also include stints in Britain and United States. He is former editor of the Statesman and has written extensively for the International Herald Tribune and essays for the Time magazine. Some of his major works include Looking East to Looking West. So what we will be doing today is that Dr. Rajat will be making some preliminary remarks by the chair. And then we will have the release of the special volume, and Mr. Kamalesh Sharma will open the India chapter of the Roundtable, and he will make some remarks, followed by the other program which is mentioned in your folders. Dr. Rajat.
Thank you, Sanjay. Mr. Kamalesh Sharma, former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Dr. Shashi Tharoor in absentia, he's, as Sanjay said, on his way, Member of Parliament, author and former Under-Secretary, United Nations, Professor James Mayall, Emeritus Fellow in International Relations, Sidney, Sussex College, Cambridge, UK, Mr. Sunanda Datta-Ray, author, columnist, and former editor of the Statesman, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I echo what Sanjay just said, and echo a very warm welcome to all of you for this discussion on Brexit and the Commonwealth, what next? Being organized by the Roundtable, the Commonwealth Journal of International Affairs, and the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER for short. And this launch is to mark the occasion of the special issue, as Sanjay said, of the journal, as well as to inaugurate the India chapter of the Roundtable. So I'll just give you a brief background on what we're going to discuss. I mean, there'll be more eminent people speaking about the topic in a few minutes. But just to set the context of what's happening in the world in terms of global trade and so on, and at the end I'll kind of try and give you an alternative view that seems to be emerging from some research institutions, especially the LSE, that trade may not be at the center, or anti-globalization in the way we understand it may not be at the center of what's happening in Britain and in the United States. But some numbers. Careful evidence suggests that between 1985 and 2007, global trade grew at twice the rate of global GDP. In the last 4 years, trade, unfortunately, has barely kept pace with the growth of global GDP. This is the most recent evidence that's coming out of the International Monetary Fund. And such slowdown is historically unprecedented. The question is, what are the reasons for this slowdown? Is it a symptom of a generally weak economic environment, or is it a consequence of increasingly restrictive trade policies? Investment has slowed down, we know. Commodity prices are down. Global value chains have matured and therefore have reached their peak. And there are several other reasons, more what are termed as evolutionary reasons, that suggest that demand is shifting to non-tradables as a consequence of increasing wealth and as a consequence of aging populations in the West. Future research will no doubt try and unpick the weight of each source, but there seems to be no doubt at the moment that globalization is seeing a lot of critics, especially in Western liberal democracies. Donald Trump's victory in the presidential elections last month, the results of Brexit a few months ago indicates that large masses of people in these countries are dissatisfied and reluctant to plug in deeper into global markets. The politicians in the campaign in both these countries have tapped the anxieties of the populations that come with free trade and the associated movement of people. But as I said, there is need for greater research and reflection on what these political developments mean. And ICRIER is certainly going to kind of partake of some of that research, but I'm sure there'll be other institutions like the IMF that will try and unpick the reasons for the developments. The referendum results, and that's going to be the major topic for the discussion today. You know the results, but to remind ourselves what the numbers were when the discussion takes place. The referendum in the UK on leave or remain in June 2016 resulted in 52% voters supporting Brexit, i.e. UK leave EU. A disaggregated analysis of the referendum results shows England and Wales voted to leave the EU with about 53% and 52% of the vote share respectively, while 62% in Scotland and almost 56% in Northern Ireland voted for remain. This pattern was also reflected in the voting across rural and urban areas and across age groups. While approximately 73% of youngsters wanted to remain in the EU, about 60% of senior citizens opted out. Immediately after these results were announced, markets fell, predictably, and since have recovered a little bit. But such market behavior was expected because this was the first time that a major nation state had decided to leave the EU. For the EU, which makes steady progress towards a single market, UK's Brexit is a major setback. It is going to be painstaking and a slow process, and the EU and the UK have negotiated many agreements that has increased trade relations between them. So therefore, Brexit will have long-term consequences. UK's GDP last quarter, I beg your pardon, fell by 0.5%, which is better than the gloomy forecasts, but nonetheless, it is a very small increase. Critical sectors such as manufacturing seem to be experiencing continued stress. UK and EU have traditionally strong economic relationship. The numbers are as follows. UK exports to EU countries about 47% of its total exports, and imports from EU around 54% of its total imports in 2015. These numbers do indicate the strong relationship that I've just spoken about. And the decline in the value of the pound after Brexit will make the imports costlier. So there will be some strains and some restrictions on the ability of the British citizen to be able to meet his livelihood concerns. Similarly, Europeans' ability to live and work in the UK will be adversely affected. These constraints on the movement of people will come at significant costs. There are concerns that foreign investment in the UK may witness a downward trend as it will not ensure access into the EU markets. You know, we at ICRIER speak often to investors from Japan, from Korea, and these concerns have been reflected by the Japanese investors as well, because a lot of Japanese investment, as you know, that went into the UK was actually meant the destination of those exports. So those transplants in the UK, the destination of those exports were for the EU. So Japan is worried, amongst other Indian investors as well. So Brexit has serious long-term impact on domestic as well as international politics. Given the differences in the voting pattern that I just spoke about, Scotland will have to abide by England's decision, but naturally this has already generated disquiet in Scotland, and there have been demands for another round of referendum on Scottish independence. Similarly, voices to re-examine Northern Ireland status within the UK have also been heard and articulated. The Brexit referendum also generated debate on powers and responsibility between the three organs of the state within the UK, and I think I'll leave this for the discussion that will precede my remarks. For the UK, the question often asked is, and Mr. Kamalesh Sharma well placed to talk about it, can the Commonwealth act as a substitute for the EU? First gut reactions are that chances look slim. The EU is a geographical neighbor with robust organizational framework and strong economic linkages, and you perhaps cannot say the same thing for the Commonwealth because it has geographically diverse countries and with different political systems. Moreover, many businesses from the Commonwealth countries have invested, as I just said, in Britain as a gateway to Europe. For instance, Indian IT and other companies invested in the UK with a view to sell to the EU markets. Now with Brexit, the Commonwealth countries may have to think about diversification into Europe. So this is the kind of anti-globalization, as it were, the economic developments. And I said in the beginning that there is a kind of research-based view that is coming out due to some, I won't go extensively into the polls and the primary survey that has been done, but let me mention what the alternative view is that seeks to explain recent global events such as Brexit and the US elections. Hi, Dr. Tharoor. So let me also take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Shashi Tharoor. So I've just finished talking about the economic rationale for developments in EU and US, and I was coming to my last comment, which is a new emerging view from the LSE. If you go to the LSE website, you'll see this, a new emerging view that does not put economics at the center of what's happening in the EU and in the United States. In this view, it is culture, it is values, and it is identity, especially amongst the white voters, that explains the preference for cultural continuity over change and specifically against migration. So this is an alternative view, and the title of the article that I read before coming here is quite evocative. In '92, I remember there was a view in the United States that suggested to the president, eventual President Mr. Clinton, that it's the economy stupid. And the title of this article that I've just quoted, the results for you, it's called, "It's Not the Economics Stupid. It's culture, it's identity, and its values." But to discuss these, the economics and the cultural issues, we have an excellent panel of experts, and we'll give the panelists 15 minutes each before we engage with the floor for what I think will be a very stimulating session, since Dr. Tharoor has just come in, and what I will do as the chair's prerogative. May I request Professor James Mayall to begin rather than Shashi as in the program? So I beg your pardon. Before we do that, may I request Mr. Kamalesh Sharma to say a few words and also to launch the journal before us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, you gave me a fright just now because I have to be getting along to another place. I'm here to launch the Indian chapter of the Roundtable. I'm not here for Brexit. I wish I were here to listen to all the wisdom on Brexit, but I was delighted when invited to announce the creation of the Indian chapter of the Roundtable. You were informed just now this is the oldest journal of international relations in the UK. In fact, it's the oldest in the world. So it has quite a pedigree from 1909. And it's very appropriate that an Indian chapter should finally be opened here. I know there are others in the rest of the world because India and the Commonwealth are joined at the hip. At the occasion of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee anniversary, many books came out honoring the Queen, and one of the best read was The Diamond Queen by Andrew Marr, who was a talk show host known all over England. And there's a sentence in that book which says that the modern Commonwealth is the gift of India. That's it, that many words. There's somebody who knows that history, who wrote that. Professor James Mayall is there. I'm delighted to see that many distinguished suspects from my past life are also here. And he would know it too. Because in 1949, the London Declaration was really the handiwork of Nehru, principally, supported, of course, by His Majesty the King and Prime Minister Attlee and the Foreign Minister of Canada at that point of time. But basically, everybody knew that the transition from the old Commonwealth to the new one was in the hands of Nehru. It was one of the most far-sighted decisions. I've called it one of the most far-reaching acts of statesmanship of the 20th century in terms of its outcome. And I had good reason for saying that. It has proven its worth, not just to Nehru and the Congress Party. There's a very interesting anecdote about it. When Atal Bihari Vajpayee, as Prime Minister, was sitting in a Chogam, one of the Commonwealth summits, he found himself sitting next to one of my predecessors, Secretary General Chief Nyoku. And he leant over to him and said, you know, Chief, you may not know the irony of the fact that I'm sitting next to you in a Commonwealth summit. And then he went on to explain. He said, because when this proposal was mooted that India should join the Commonwealth, I was one of the most robust opponents of that idea. And I continued to be an opponent for a very long period of time. My party took a view which was antithetical to what Nehru said. And Nehru said very plain things. He said, why must we allow the sentiment of the time to cloud our judgment as to what this organization could be in the time to come? After all, it's a demonstration that we can overcome the past. And if people from different parts of the world can come and meet together and tell each other what the world looks like from where they are, What can be the harm in it? And so on. And he said, now sitting here, I see the validity of what the man said. And I also see the validity of the reputation he so justly enjoys of being able to see further than most of us at that time. Now, the Commonwealth is a little bit not the flavor of any year organization. It has done it no harm to be like that. A bit on the margins, perhaps a little bit an accident of history, and so on. But these things have really strengthened the contribution which the Commonwealth has been able to make, very quietly. I'm glad that one of my statements shortly before I was leaving was quoted in The Economist, which said a lot of wrong things as well, which is, there's scarcely an organization which has contributed so much to the wisdom and sanity of our times. And part of the reason is its variety, 30 small states, the biggest states that you have, India, Australia, and so on, emerging economies like Malaysia, India, Singapore, and the others, post-industrial economies like the UK. All the variety of the world is represented in it. And it demonstrates that you can still create common ground and stand on it. And it's repeatedly done so. And there's very convincing, unperceived evidence of it. And I want to give two pieces of evidence before I leave. There are 19 members of the Commonwealth in Africa, which is a continent of 54 member states. Transparency International, based in Berlin, which does a very neutral and very thorough job of inspection and scrutiny, every year does an analysis, continent-wise, of where these countries stand in terms of the standards of transparency and anti-corruption. 8 out of the first 10 in Africa are always from the Commonwealth, even though it constitutes only a membership of 19. Mo Ibrahim Index, one of the most fastidious indexes that has been produced on governance as a whole. If you look at what they look at, it's worth looking at it. Same results, 8 out of 10. So something is working. So when we have our chogams, when we meet, when our ministers meet, when our board of governors meet, there's a process of sedimentation which is taking place all the time and lifting the performance where we want it. Where do we want this performance limited? Right now, when we see what's happening in the world, at least in 2 areas. One is, what are the values by which all of us want to live? Uniquely, the Commonwealth has a ministerial action group which has 8 particular specific points on which every member state, 53 now, has agreed to be judged. And we worked at it for many years to find political acceptance of it. Treatment of the media, treatment of the opposition, a level playing field at election time, independence of the judiciary, and so on. There are 8 of them. And this gives you the benchmarking that you need. And the other one is a much larger question of who's benefiting. The word globalization was mentioned. Who's benefiting by what's happening in the world? Well, obviously, a lot of people are being left behind. And the first principle behind the Commonwealth is that no human community, irrespective of size and endowment, can be left behind. Every human community has an equal right to a place in the sun. Well, lots of people feel that they don't have a place in the sun. And in very developed economies, there's seismic events taking place because people are being left behind. There's no organization in the world which does more for small states in debt, in climate change, in values, in technical assistance, and the projects that we have developed over the last so many years than the Commonwealth does. So when I say that the emergence of the Commonwealth is one of the most important facts of the last century, it's with a great deal of reason and logic and finding and arguments, because it has repeatedly demonstrated its worth. Thank you, Sanjay. You invited me. I was supposed to speak for 5 minutes, but next time you'll remember that when you invite me to do anything. It's a great pleasure for me to inaugurate